Olha só, peguei um tempo aqui, tá chovendo um pouco, tá um pouco frio, mas é hora de ir lá pro Chateau Montelena. Chateau Montelena, como já falei, é um lugar famoso e a gente precisa conhecer. Vou falar com o Bo Barrett, que é o proprietário, é o cara que apareceu nos filmes. E se você não viu o filme, você tem que assistir aquele Julgamento de Paris, você vai ver que é super legal a história. Vamos lá então conhecer o Chateau Montelena. Hoje é um dia especial aqui no Vinhos de Corte, porque a gente está, como eu disse para vocês, no Chateau Montelena. Quem assistiu o filme Julgamento de Paris com certeza sabe do que eu estou falando, daquele grande evento que aconteceu. O pessoal aqui da Califórnia foi chamado para participar lá em Paris de um julgamento onde era mais ou menos uma disputa entre os vinhos californianos e os vinhos franceses, e o Chateau Montelena venceu. E eu estou aqui com o Bo Barrett, que fez parte dessa história e vai estar aqui com a gente para a gente conversar. Mr. Bo, thank you. Thank you very much for coming and for talking to us. People in Brazil really want to know your history and about Chateau Montelena.
Perfect. Well, came to the right place. It's a bit of history and the modern world blended together. We're doing a lot of interesting things here still.
Yeah, and of course we're going to taste these 5 wines, but before we start tasting, I want to know a little bit about the history, and for everybody that watched the movie.
Okay. Well, for a country like Brazil, it's very important that California is a very new industry here. We really started in about 1849 with the gold rush. And the people in California that did not find gold did what they originally did. So by 1860, the Germans that came for the gold rush from Germany, they started making wine. And the Italians over in Sonoma, they started making wine because there was San Francisco, the city was built, 1849 in California. So what happened was by 1900, Californian wine is taking off. It's really going good. It's becoming a world center of wine. And historically, very briefly, at that time, Europe, Bordeaux and France, their vines were going down because of the phylloxera. So the disease, the phylloxera disease, was taking Europe out. Meanwhile, Californian wines were taking off. So it was a very strong time for Californian wine. But our government got prohibition in 1913 to 1933, so they just completely killed the business. It just wiped out a very new business. So this is why the only reason wine's not a huge part of American culture was because the government made a really bad decision with prohibition. So our part in it is in 1960s, 1970s, where wine starts to come out again. Again, it's 50 years because right after prohibition there's the Depression, and then there's World War II, so there's no money to invest in the business, so the California wine industry stays very quiet, and really nothing happens. It's, industrial wines are made in California, and only industrial wines. And so what happened is in the 1970s, say 1965 through 1970, small wineries started again here. So Chateau Montelena was part of the original. It was built in 1882 as one of the handcrafted specialty wineries making the top wines by 1890. But it went out of business with prohibition, unfortunately. So then the winery was abandoned until 1972. It was what we call in California a ghost winery.
Yeah?
Yeah, the guys that got ghost winery. So it was abandoned, and so my father and a group of guys put together a team to rebuild the winery in 1972. So they resurrected the ghost winery and started making, handcrafted American wines.
Yeah. Talking about this ghost wineries, it reminds me that I was driving through some ways here in California, Napa Valley, and by now we have some wineries that are quite ghosts also, because I don't know, because of the depression that you had a few years ago.
The term how we use ghost wineries was the wineries from Prohibition that were abandoned and they were not resurrected until later. It's not that there was ghosts in there.
Yeah, I know.
No phantasms.
No. Yeah, but I mean, now you have some wineries here in the United States that are for sale.
Sure. Yeah, it's the wine industry, as we've learned globally, is we can look at the good thing about the wine industry in California. We can look at the global model, and like any agricultural enterprise, any good agricultural enterprise eventually gets overbuilt or overcapacity.
Yeah.
And so that's actually a healthy sign that the winemaking is now a normal part of American agriculture. It's integrated into the system. It's not just boom, go, 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 grow, grow, grow. That it has a normal cycle of agriculture where it goes up and down. You know, sometimes any agricultural crop is overplanted or underplanted. It could be apples, peaches, pears,
yeah.
you know, corn, maize, anything, and grapes. Even in luxury wines like Napa Valley and Bordeaux. So what we're seeing now is the same cycle you would experience in a mature wine-producing region, say in Europe.
Okay.
So the flow, it's more like a tide. It's not really a boom and a bust, but it's kind of the tide comes in and the tide goes out.
Yeah, we hope so.
Yeah, no, it's fine. The industry that's strengthening now. It's a cyclical business. It's normal, but I don't think people want to talk about
no, okay.
the business. And we could have a whole seminar on the business of winemaking. But let's put it this way: keep it simple. The American wine industry is maturing now. You know, 100 years after the end of Prohibition, 1932. It's kind of just only 15 years from now. You know, 1932, 33. So the bad idea of American government takes 100 years to go away, with 3 generations. That's where we're at now. It's a maturing industry, and Napa Valley is at the forefront of it. And so that's where we're gaining the place where we should have been had there not been Prohibition.
Yeah, it reminds me a phrase that I saw. I don't know if it's from some Italian producer that he said something like, it's not difficult, it's not hard to produce wine, to make wine. You just have to grow the vines and work for 100 years, and it's going to be fine.
That's pretty much the way it is, to identify the place, and that's just the constant work. It's a lot of work, and people don't realize how much work it is.
Yeah, I guess. But talking about Chateau Montelena now, nowadays, how big is your chateau now?
Well, we started by 1974, before the Paris tasting. We measured things a little different than the Europeans. They talk about bottles. Here we talk about tons or cases, 12 bottle cases. So our metrics are a little bit confusing for those who are accustomed to the rest of the world counts in bottles.
Yeah.
And we don't do that.
Yeah, but it's okay.
It's okay. So basically, by 1974, 75, we were doing about 475 tons. 40,000 cases. Okay. And now Chateau Montelena is fully mature, and we're making a little under 50,000 cases, and that's as much as we want to make. We've been at that size for about 15 years. It's this Chateau Montelena is modeled after the success of the Bordeaux first growth. There's an upper limit of how much like Latour or Margaux or those guys make. So as Americans, we can really learn from history and say the ideal size for a handcrafted wine, where our total focus is on quality, is about 50,000 cases, because you have enough money to do the right thing, and you can afford to replant or afford new equipment. It's important to have enough revenue to pay for things like replanting. It's very expensive. You take a vineyard out of production, you're no longer selling that wine, so you have to have other vineyards. But basically, 50,000 cases is a nice, healthy size. You make more. You're no longer a craftsman or an artist. You're an administrator, and it's not as much fun. Yeah. So basically, it's a fully mature winery, but basically we've been fixed size. We grow about 10% per decade. So in 1974, we were doing 35,000 cases, and now we do 50. So we're basically it's actually still a small family winery. My father and I, it's still family owned. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but anyway, it sounds like a good thing that you are growing every time. I mean, you could grow, but you don't want to.
Right? Yeah. Oh no, we've had the opportunity to go big. We won the Paris tasting, and more tastings out. How much Chardonnay could we have sold in 1970? For example, we could have had the opportunity to make lots of Chardonnays, sell out.
Of course.
Same thing, just a couple years ago when the film came out and the Chardonnay becomes famous again.
Yeah.
We could sell out and make a lot more.
Yeah.
Sell a lot more, but that's not our thing. We really focus on quality and really delivering to our customers like the very best wines that can be grown in these vineyards. So we're very much a viticultural operated place. In other words, why can't we make more Chardonnay? Because we don't have the land to do that. It's not those special vineyards. And the same with our Cabernet. And if you think about our Chardonnay, the funny thing is the Chardonnay was actually a cash flow product because we bought Chateau Montelena. It is a red wine property, and we had to replant all 100 acres. To replant the red wine vineyard to grow wheat, you grow the grapes for 3 years before you get any grapes. Then you got to make wine for 2 years before you get any, and then you got to bottle age it and sell it for a year. So when you replant the red vineyard, your money goes away for 7 years before you see a single dollar coming back.
Yeah.
With white wine, you could buy, in those days you could buy the grapes, and in the case of Riesling or Sauvignon Blanc, you could start selling the wine in 7 months. And Chardonnay, 2 years. So think about that, 7 years versus 2 years. So we made Chardonnay and Riesling just to afford to replant our red grape vineyard. So the reason we made Chardonnay was actually not for an artisanal reason originally. The original reason to make Chardonnay as a function was so we could afford to replant our red vineyards and start our red wine winery, which is what, in the last 25 years we've been more renowned for our estate Cabernet.
Yeah.
And the Chardonnay was to basically fund that operation. But because our focus on the top quality of everything, that we were so focused on quality on all of our wines that it worked really well. So the Chardonnay to this day remains extremely popular.
Yeah.
It was made famous in 1976. It was made famous again by the film. But our focus on quality, we've never let our customers down. So that's what, now you find it, after all these years, we have all of our different wines. They all are different media. White wine is like paintings and red wines are like sculptures. And so we find a really good position where we're well renowned for the Chardonnay, because we've never changed the style and never sold out, went big. And the Cabernet, we proved by the 78 vintage, that was a fantastic wine. We can taste it today. You can see each wine that we make stands on its own legs. In other words, the Cabernet doesn't depend on the Chardonnay. The Chardonnay doesn't depend on the Cabernet. They're all. This is one of the few wineries in the world that's been named the first growth for Chardonnay and Cabernet.
Perfect. Can we taste the first wine?
We're going to taste this. This is from our vineyards in Down Valley. We also, because we're a typical border house, we make a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc. We also make Riesling, but we're out right now.
Yeah.
But this is our Sauvignon Blanc. It's
2010.
This is the 10.
Ok.
The 2010.
Let me show it to the camera. Esse é o Sauvignon Blanc 2010. É o primeiro que a gente vai provar aqui. And if you can tell us a little bit more about this wine.
Right, so basically all of our wines, Chateau Montelena is a traditional house, which means we use traditional European styling with California flavors.
Yeah.
So you've got to think about Sauvignon Blanc's a Bordeaux grape, but we have a lot more sunlight than Bordeaux. So basically think about Chateau Montelena as you taste our wines, traditional styling, alcohol, acid, pH, very typical as you find in a classic European wine, but with a little bit more fruit and ripeness that you'd see from the more sunlight that we get in California.
Vou fazer aqui rapidamente o meu comentário. É um vinho que ele é muito brilhante, acho que está muito legal. E de novo, como eu já falei de outros vinhos aqui que eu já provei, ele não tem aquela fruta tão explosiva e tão que às vezes até sobressai sobre alguns outros aromas. Ele é mais elegante, é o que me parece aqui.
And some Sauvignon Blancs have sugar, but we make all of our white wines are dry. Basically, we don't make sweet wine here.
Is there any specific reason for not doing this kind of wine?
Yeah, it's just a traditional styling. The other Sauvignon Blanc that's famous for being sweet is Sauternes, and it has to have a lot more rain during the harvest to make that work to get the botrytis. Typically in Western North America, California, it doesn't rain enough in the fall to get good natural botrytis. There are some American producers of sweet dessert Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah.
It's too much of a headache. I mean, you can make wine like this, it's like, it's good, and let the other guys do the hard work.
Yeah, that's right. Acho interessante essa filosofia deles aqui, que é, por que não fazer então um vinho de sobremesa? Bom, nós fazemos bem esses vinhos brancos, esses vinhos secos, por que a gente vai ter dor de cabeça fazendo com os outros? Isso é legal, uma coisa interessante aí que às vezes alguns produtores eles querem fazer tudo, né? Querem fazer espumante, branco, tinto, rosé, sobremesa, enfim, e às vezes não fazem bem nada, né? Isso obviamente não é uma regra, existem várias exceções, muitas casas fazem muito bem, mas tem alguns que tentam fazer tudo e às vezes não conseguem fazer nada. É muito legal, gostei dessa resposta, desse direcionamento. Of course, you understood everything.
Everything.
Okay, that's good.
We've had a few Portuguese working here over the years, and my daughter had a Brazilian friend working at Opus.
Oh, yeah.
Because, as Brazil moves into the wine industry too.
Yes.
And the University of Brazil, or whatever, the wine guys in Brazil are collaborating with UC Davis, and I've met a few of the Brazilian students that are working in the U.S. right now.
Yeah.
So it's an encouraging time for Brazil because I think that they're a few years behind us. But I remember when we were pioneers, and it's probably got to be really exciting for wine producers down there because it just kind of takes me back to when California was in the position that you find Brazil in today, just starting and getting going, and it's a very exciting time.
Yeah.
So it's got to be a lot of fun for
yes.
as they grow up.
And we have to take this time because the market in Brazil is growing. People are drinking more wine. So we have to, the producers, the importers, they have to take this time to put good wines for us in Brazil.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Because, there's so many bad wines that, the bad thing is that there are more bad wines than good wines in the world. So,
that used to be the case, but what will happen is that in the United States that used to be the case too, but now it's almost all good wines here.
Here?
But
if you take
15 years ago it was easy to find some inferior wine. Now you have to really work to find a wine that has a technical problem. It's I think that they'll find that the rising tide lifts all the boats, that everybody who survives, that the quality will go up.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find that is a repeating phenomenon.
Yeah, good. Well, we have a second wine.
Right, this is our Chardonnay. Now this is made in a style. Basically, as I said, we make a traditional style Chardonnay. It's basically modeled after the white Burgundy of France, where Chardonnay was originally founded.
Yeah.
And we really haven't changed our style. It's very much a vineyard-driven wine. A lot of fruit flavor. Chardonnay, it lends itself to a lot of manipulations, barrel fermentations and stringy yeast, and we don't do any of that stuff. This is just find the very best grapes you can. They're half whole cluster pressed and half crushed and destemmed for a little bit of aroma. And then it is barrel aged, but we use only 7% new wood, so we're very low on the hand demand. We're trying to specialize and focusing on how great these vineyards and how great these grapes taste, not what good technicians we are.
Yeah. And of course, when we drink your Chardonnay, it takes us to the Paris judgment, and I didn't taste that vintage. There was 73, right?
Yeah, the 73, and the tasting was in 1976, and the wine was 73. So it was a 3-year-old wine.
Yeah, but the question is, what is the difference, or what is the same in the 73 and the 2009 wine?
In general, this is a more precise wine. We have basically the wine is extremely similar. We're trying to make it in that same style, which was we focus on these vineyards, and we have numerous different vineyards of Chardonnay and clones where we lay them together for complexity. So rather than making a complex wine in the winery with oak and yeast and stirring and all these other manipulations of the winemaking team, what we do is we have different clones, and so that wine, it's kind of the antithesis of white Burgundy because that's just a single vineyard left alone. And that's a very complex situation. So to achieve that type of complexity, we have to use layers of different vineyards. Even though it's small, it's only a 60-acre field, probably 20 hectare.
Yeah.
And so that's where the Chardonnay is grown. But we have to have different clones. Basically, it has a lot of fruit, very pure flavors. It's true to type, very bold and primary. And then as it ages, that's where the other things will come out of the taste. But basically today, right now, if you put this wine would be more in a blind tasting of American Chardonnays, they would say it's the ringer, it's the one that's not from California because it's not New World.
Yeah.
New World Chardonnays typically are made for people that are just beginning to drink wine, where, I don't like wine sour.
Yeah.
So they have some sugar in there, lots of oak, and it's more yeast like bread, like that champagne aroma where they have the vitamin aromas. And so ours is not, and those I would call those entry-level Chardonnays. They're very appealing, they're very commercial, they're scalable, they're easy to make a lot of, they're super successful, and they introduce people to how good wine can be. It's a very valuable style of wine. We don't make that because our wine is for more like people that have been drinking wine in the 7 to 10 years range, and they like this brightness, and they understand why expensive wines are expensive, like ours, that they're handcrafted special pieces of the planet, and that we're capturing that in some light and putting it in the bottle. So it's our Chardonnay is a lot more complicated. It seems simpler, but it's more complicated.
Yeah.
So then the commercial Chardonnays, and I'm not saying the commercial Chardonnays aren't good,
No.
or the New World
They're
styles. They're very functional. They really do a great job.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that some of your viewers will like those, softer,
Of course.
easier to drink Chardonnay. This is one that's more traditional. It's built to age.
É. Bom, com certeza vocês devem estar querendo saber aí sobre esse Chardonnay. O interessante, e corrobora muito com o que ele falou, é que é um vinho complexo, mas não é um vinho difícil de beber. Ele tem os aromas muito claros, mas ao mesmo tempo você percebe que tem bastante complexidade nele, e na boca a acidez dele, junto com os aromas, né, que se confirmam na boca, é uma coisa muito interessante. É realmente um vinho especial, é um vinho que a gente percebe que ele foi muito bem feito, ele tem aí um excelente trabalho, mas é um vinho que merece ser descoberto. Sabe aquele vinho que você coloca na taça, deixa um tempo ali, volta nele, é legal discutir. Esse é um vinho que merece essa atenção aí para se provar. O Bo acha que deve ser para pessoas que já estão bebendo há algum tempo, que já estão acostumadas com vinho. Pode ser sim, claro, mas se você também está começando a beber, você pode provar esse, você vai ter isso como referência como um excelente vinho.